Patch 12.2 is bringing a lot of changes to the table. In this video, I'll go through the patch, then predict how this will change the meta, and then finish off by giving you a tier list so you know what to play tomorrow. Starting off with system changes. We see that legendary odds are getting nerfed by 1% at level 8 and buffed by 1% at level 9. Personally, I really like this change. The amount of 2-stars I've seen on stage 4 and 5 recently is just way too much, so making it less likely to pull that off is nice. It's not the first time they've changed the odds at level 8 to 4%, so I wouldn't be surprised if this gets reverted back to 5% in a patch or two. Moving on to traits. Bodyguard is getting nerfed at all levels. Now they will have less armor, but more shields. This is a great change, as it felt as if you couldn't play the game without Last Whisper last patch. Although it will still be a great item to get through bodyguards, it won't feel as bad when you don't hit that item. Mercenary is getting nerfed around the middle parts of the table. At 4 through 7 loss, you now get less gold and less Nikos. This makes Mercenary loss streak worse, but it is still amazing if you're able to pull it off. 4 Scrap is getting a buff. Although the synergy is already great in the early and mid game, they buffed it to incentivize more people to transition into 6 Scrap late game, which is fine as 6 Scrap has not been that meta for a while. Syndicate gets a nerf at 3 and 5, but buffed at 7. This is fine as Syndicate Shaco and Akali was a little too strong last patch, so it's nice to see those being brought down. Math-wise, 7 Syndicate should be a little stronger now as it gets more Omnivamp, and the armor and MR should be around the same level. There's only one cost change, and Siggs is getting nerfed at 1 and 2 star and buffed at 3 star. It is a small change, but it will still be noticeable for Arcanist and Yordle openers. Katarina is getting an HP buff. I suppose this will make Katarina carry more viable next patch as she has more HP to heal back up in total, but I still think that Talon or Shaco might remain the premier assassin carries. Zyra is getting a damage nerf at 1 star and a buff at 3 star. I like this change, although I wish they went farther. This unit deals insane amounts of damage, so I like the nerf at 1 star, but hitting the damage a little harder is something I would have liked to see. Swain gets a small mana nerf. He will cast a little less often, but it shouldn't affect him too much. Talon gets an attack speed nerf. This is not enough to kill Talon reroll, but you might have to hit other assassin 3 stars now to be competitive. Moving on to 3 costs, Cho'Gath is getting buffed. Now he deals more damage at every level and also has more resistances. I think this is a good change as Cho'Gath has been close to absent in the last patch. Gangplank is getting a nice buff at 2 and 3 star. Now it might be more worth to use him as an item carrier for AD champs, but it's not enough for reroll mercenaries to start popping up, so I would be surprised if that becomes meta. Heimerdinger is getting a large buff. Now he finally gets more attack speed, and he also gets to deal more damage at 2 and 3 star. This is a nice change to see. Now Heimer without blue buff won't feel like as much of a joke, as he will generate mana a little quicker with his auto attacks, and he will deal a decent amount of damage at 3 star as well. Misfortune is getting a small buff at 2 star and a large buff at 3 star. I suppose the developers want to push for reroll mercenaries to be a comp, but with just the GP buff and this buff, I don't think it will be enough to make it happen. Shaco gets a -5 AD nerf. This is fine as he was great on the last patch, and this will make him a little more fair to play against. Vex gets a tiny nerf at 1 star. This is nice to see as Vex 1 star with some Arcanists shielded for way too much. Moving on to 4 costs, Braum is getting a mana nerf. This will make him take longer to cast again, which is awesome to see as this dude has been slamming his shield into the ground multiple times every fight on this patch. Seraphine gets her healing nerfed. This is a great change as she healed for insane amounts at 2 star. Her damage is still the same, so using her as a carry and innovators will still work, but obviously it will be weaker now with the healing nerfs. Sion gets a similar nerf as Braum. This is nice to see as this dude has also been casting way too many times in every single fight this patch. Urgot gets a decent buff at all levels and a large buff at 3 star. This change is fine, but the main reason Chemtech has been struggling is because Jinx sucks and Urgot struggles a lot against Colossus and high armor targets. So he also gets indirectly buffed by all the armor reduction in this patch as well. Lux gets an attack speed buff. This is good as it makes Lux more consistent, as that is what she is lacking right now as a carry. Some fights you just one-shot everything and keep getting resets, and in other fights you don't reset a single time, and by the time you ult again, the enemy team have healed to full. Jhin and Yone 3 star get a nerf, but they are obviously still worth chasing, and Orianna 2 star will shield for a little less, which won't have that big of an impact, but with all the AP scaling you usually put on Orianna, it will actually be noticeable. Moving on to 5 costs, Kench is getting his damage nerfed at 1 and 2 star. This is fine as Kench felt incredibly strong on the last patch. However, I wish they would have reduced his tankiness instead, as sometimes it's just impossible to kill this unit. Melee Jace becomes more tanky, which is nice to see. He has been almost exclusively used as a backline unit this patch. Jinx gets a buff at 1 and 2 star. She is just a terrible unit as she gets stuck on Colossuses and bodyguards, and if you're on Last Whisper then you don't have any damage as you also need a BT or a GA to not die right after landing. But maybe after Scion nerfs and bodyguard nerfs she will become more playable, but this Jinx buff alone won't make her too much more viable. Victor gets a buff at 1 and 2 star, which is fine. He already felt like a decent carry, but the inconsistency of his spell targeting is what is holding him back right now, and also with the legendary percentage nerfs, then he should get some compensation. Kai'Sa gets a small attack speed nerf. This will hit her in challenger comps mostly, as that trait scales incredibly well off the base attack speed, but she should still be the primary carry in most 3 socialite comps. Moving on to items, Locket gets a buff to its duration. This is a really interesting change, as now this might be worth making, especially if you have additional buffs to shields. This won't have that big of an impact in the late game, but you will definitely see more people slamming this item on this next patch. Chalice gets nerfed back to where it was last patch, which is fine, as too many people are slamming this item and just making multiple chalices to buff up their entire team. Hand of Justice gets a small buff. Now it will heal or deal 3% more depending on if you're all healing or damage. Moving on to augments, they're changing around the hearts and crests again. Pause if you want to check out all of them, but the biggest change is that Bodyguard heart doesn't give a Leona anymore. Metabolic Accelerator does not heal you during the PvE rounds anymore, so this is a welcome change as this augment was almost always an insta-grab on stage 1-4. Item Grab Bag 2 gets 1 Reforger back, which is nice to see. This way you won't get trolled as hard when you low roll. Shrug It Off becomes a tier 1 augment. This is nice to see as you would only take this augment in reroll Bruiser comps, so now it has some more flexibility and you're able to play it in 6 scrap comps and also in Chemtech Urgot comps. Wise Spending gets a small buff. Now you get +4 gold when you choose this augment. I think what's holding this augment back is that it's very hard to play. If you pick this augment, you just need to slow roll above 50 gold for the entire game and then start rolling down more aggressively once you get closer to 30 or 40 HP. High Roller gets the same treatment, +4 gold when you pick it. This has barely any impact as you would only grab this if you were in a spot to hit 3-star forecasts or if you are trying to finish off 3 stars in a reroll comp. Portable Forge becomes a tier 2 augment. They're also nerfing some of the items to compensate, but this is awesome to see as I really like Ornn items, but it has just not felt worth it to pick this augment at all as it just sucks compared to the other prismatics. But now, I'll probably be picking this augment quite often when it's shown. Thrill of the Hunt 3 is getting removed from the game. I get the reasoning here as some champions don't even have 900 HP, so a lot of the resources here are getting wasted if you pick this augment. Plus, it's not that exciting to pick either, so I'm completely fine with this one. Sniper's Nest now has an indicator to show how many stacks you have on each slot with your snipers. Stand Behind Me gets a buff to compensate for all the bodyguard nerfs coming this patch. This augment is really weird and I have not taken this since the set 6 PvE, and I don't see myself picking this augment too much in the next patch either. There are also some bug fixes, so pause the video if you want to read through those. Now to understand how the meta will change with this patch, we need to look at what the meta was like in patch 12.1. As we can see here, there were multiple comps with a below 4.5 average rank, but a lot of them are variations of the same comps. As we can see, there are 2 versions of Syndicate Shaco and 3 versions of Imperial Talon that all did well. Naturally, this meta was controlled by assassins and a lot of comps that did well had to play well into assassins. Other fast 8 comps such as Innovators, Arcanists, and Kai'Sa did well in this patch as they either had multiple carries or had carries that were able to dodge the assassins by moving around. Since we will see a nerf to both Syndicates and Shaco and the legendary percentage, the only assassin comp left in the meta will be some form of Talon reroll. And since you can't really contest a 2-cost reroll, it will be significantly weaker this next patch as you will get contested more often. We also need to look at the legendary percentage nerf at level 8. That will technically give a 20% nerf to all comps that relies on legendaries, as you need to roll through more gold in order to hit now. Looking at this chart, we now need to roll through 41 shops at level 8 to consistently hit the legendaries we need, which means you need to roll through 82 gold to hit a specific legendary. This will make any comp that relies on a legendary to perform significantly worse. Those are comps such as Innovators with Jace, Socialite with both Galio and Kai'Sa, Syndicates with Akali, Chemtech with Victor, Jinx, and Tahm Kench, and you can also argue Sniper Jhin with Yuumi and Jace, but you can run the Scion variant that doesn't use any legendaries with that comp. Another thing to note is that comps that don't need legendaries will become a lot stronger, which results in a more aggressive meta with more people rolling at level 6 and 7. This further incentivizes people to stay away from comps that rely on legendaries. Lastly, a huge part about this meta was bodyguards. If you didn't have Last Whisper, you literally couldn't play the game as an AD comp. The nerf to that synergy will also open up other frontlines such as bruisers, which might make Chemtech and other scrap comps more viable now. With all that speculation, let's take a look at my prediction tier list for patch 12.2. Usually I include a C tier, but in this last meta there were really no C tier comps, and since there aren't any major changes, I expect most things to still be playable in B tier at best. The only S tier comp is Challenger Yone. This is because that comp was great last patch, and now you don't need Last Whisper as your third item every single time. In addition, challengers don't need Kaisa to hit 6 challengers, so it won't be affected as hard as other comps by the legendary percentage. In A tier I have Talon or Assassin reroll. We might go back to Katarina carry, but I still think Talon might be better. This comp will be great as there probably won't be any Syndicate Shaco players anymore in the meta, which makes it easier to 3-star all of the Assassin units. Chemtech Urgot would have been S tier if it wasn't for the legendary changes. This comp is not heavily reliant on legendaries, but it will be a lot harder to win when you don't have as great access to Jinx, Victor, and Tahm Kench. But with the buffs to Urgot, it will definitely open up his itemization a little more, which is nice. Kog'Maw reroll performed surprisingly strong last patch, and the comp is not getting nerfed, therefore I think it has potential to be one of the better comps this patch. Since Kog'Maw's spell makes him great against shredding high HP targets, he will play well into Bruiser frontlines. Arcanist Lux is one of the comps I'm struggling the most to place. Lux is great at one-shotting targets, but struggles against high HP targets as she isn't getting resets off. She did get an attack speed buff that will let her generate mana faster, but if it's enough to still be competitive against comps where she's not getting resets all the time, it's not something I'm 100% sure about. Another thing to note is that going for Giant Slayer Deathcap as the third and second item on Lux will be preferred now if we end up in a Bruiser meta. Trundle reroll in A tier might be my most spiciest prediction, but since bodyguards are getting nerfed, Trundle will actually be able to get through frontline now without Last Whisper. In addition, since both Talon and Kog'Maw reroll will remain in the meta, many 2-cost units are being taken out of the pool, making it easier to hit both Trundle and Vi 3-star. On top of that, we also got a buff to 4 scrap, which is used in Trundle reroll relatively often. Heimer reroll is another comp that is on the edge between B and A tier, but since Heimerdinger got a buff to both the 2-star and 3-star variation, as well as comps that contest its units got nerfed, I think this comp has potential in the upcoming patch, but I wouldn't be surprised if it fell down to B tier since it relies mostly on 3-cost 3-stars. Moving on to B tier, we have Jhin, which was great at the start of the last patch, but ended up falling out towards the end. It didn't get any buffs, and now it is very reliant on running this Scion variation as both Jace and Yuumi will be harder to hit. Enchanter, Orianna, and Innovators are very similar comps that got nerfed in similar ways. Both Seraphine and Orianna got nerfed on their own, and since Jace and Yuumi will be harder to hit, winning the game with any of these 2 comps will be hard. In addition, Chalice got nerfed, which was a huge factor in these 2 comps succeeding on the last patch. Syndicate Shaco got triple nerfed. Shaco got a nerf, Syndicate Synergy got a nerf, and now Akali will be harder to hit at level 8. Since Talon will be favored a lot more now, I would not be surprised if Syndicate Shaco falls completely out of the meta. However, with less healing and armor in the meta, Shaco will perform better, but there are better comps than Syndicate Shaco to pick. Socialite Kaisa will still be a fantastic comp if you hit it, but now you are less likely to hit, making this comp remain in B tier. You need to high roll a lot for this comp to work. 6 Yordles has potential this patch, and with all the potential rerollers, it will be easier to hit. And with the buffs to Heimerdinger as well, it will be easier to stabilize and stop the bleeding during the mid game. Tristana has similar strengths and weaknesses as 6 Yordles, but Tristana as a unit just isn't strong enough to be a premier carry, but with all the 2 costs being taken out of the pool, you will hit a lot faster now, so it might even be worth it as you can actually get Jhin online later. That was my prediction, let me know what you think in the comments, and good luck tomorrow when the patch drops. Thank you so much for watching. If you learned something, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Comment down below what video you want me to make next, and if you want to get better at TFT, join the Discord. We got nearly 7,000 other players there who are hungry to climb, and if you want to get coached by me, the information is over in the Discord server as well. So take care, and see you in the next video.